What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? Welcome into another video of my first round one quarterback rookie draft series. This is going to be talking about my 1.06, another wide receiver, my wide receiver 3 in the class. If you've missed any of the previous 5 videos, 101 through the 105, covering my top 3 running backs and my top 2 wide receivers to this point, I invite you to go back and check those out. Otherwise, today we are going to be talking about, like I said, my 1.06, my wide receiver 3, and it is finally time to talk about Alabama wide receiver DeVonta Smith. So let's get it cracking. So DeVonta Smith comes in as the current 1.04 in February 1 quarterback ADP, and he actually has a wide range himself, going anywhere from the 1.02 all the way down to the 1.07, but he's mainly found in that 3, 4, and 5 range in one quarterback leagues and slightly lower in Superflex just because of the quarterbacks being bumped ahead of him. So DeVonta Smith is a super interesting wide receiver candidate and prospect in this class. There's a lot of people who really like him from a film standpoint, and I mean, how can't you? The dude is an absolute baller. When you put on his highlight reel or just look at his regular tape, he is absolutely a standout elite wide receiver. But then there's that analytics side, the side that I come from, that see blemishes in DeVonta Smith's profile. He's not as good of a prospect as Jamar Chase, and I even put him below Rashad Bateman. But we'll get into all of that here soon enough. We'll dive really deep into DeVonta Smith's profile, at least from an analytics standpoint, and let you guys make your own informed decisions on what you truly believe on the 2020 Heisman winner. So getting into his college stats, at least his freshman year, 2017 season, wasn't a whole lot going on for him. He had 8 receptions, 160 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and was essentially the wide receiver 6 behind Calvin Ridley, Robert Foster, Jerry Jeudy, Cam Sims, Henry Ruggs, and even was out-targeted by 3 running backs. That's Bo Scarborough, Josh Jacobs, and Damian Harris. And then Irv Smith, the tight end as well, was in there. So, spoiler alert, all of those guys that I just named are all in the NFL right now. So this was a fantastic 2017 Alabama team led by Jalen Hurts, and then Tua Tagovailoa comes in to finish out the year. And I really can't say much in terms of his production or what he did here because he really wasn't asked to do much. He didn't need to do much. And like I said, it's his freshman year. I give a lot of wide receivers passes for their freshman production if they don't have it and they have that later on production. So moving on to his sophomore season, 2018, he had a bump up, 42 receptions, 693 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's still playing behind Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, and now we have Jalen Waddle, freshman, coming in and entering the mix as well. So there's still a lot of competition for targets. This is kind of the primary argument against the analytics standpoint that Jerry Jeudy wasn't a great analytical prospect. Henry Ruggs certainly was not a great analytical prospect. Even though they had that first round draft capital, the production wasn't ultimately there for either of those two guys. And now that conversation is starting to come into DeVonta Smith's and Jalen Waddle's profiles for this class. But we'll dive into that more, like I said, as we get along this video. But it was a solid sophomore campaign. Does not have that early production that other wide receivers have in this class, but that is certainly going to come up, especially in that 2019, his junior season. 68 receptions, 1,256 yards, and 14 touchdowns. He's still playing with that same group from the 2017 season, that Jeudy, Ruggs, and Waddle group. But now this year, he actually led Bama in yards and touchdowns, and was arguably the better wide receiver and the best wide receiver of the 4 in his junior year. And that was kind of my argument against Henry Ruggs last year, was when you looked at their same seasons in 2018, a lot of these wide receivers, Ruggs, Waddle, and Smith, they all had in that 40 range of receptions, 6, 7, 800 yards, and a handful of touchdowns. But it was DeVonta Smith who made the jump to being the clear-cut guy out of that group of 3 to play alongside Jerry Jeudy. And we obviously know and anticipate that Jerry Jeudy can be a really good NFL player. And DeVonta Smith was actually better than Jerry Jeudy in 2019. So that alone, if he would have came out last year, he had the eligibility to come out in the 2020 wide receiver class. He would have been a top wide receiver. He still would have been a first-round pick last year, but he decided to stay for his final year. And this senior season, the 2020 year, was absolutely insane. 117 receptions, 1,856 yards, and 23 touchdowns in 13 games. So like Najee Harris, he basically averaged 2 receiving touchdowns per game, was almost there. Also scored 1 more touchdown on the ground on one of his 4 rush attempts. So 24 touchdowns in 13 games. That's basically scoring twice per game, just like Najee Harris. This Alabama offense was absolutely crazy. And again, it was only DeVonta Smith this time in 2020. Jalen Waddle was there, but he missed half the year. So it was really only DeVonta Smith taking over on the wide receiver group. You knew the ball was going to him. Defenses had to account for that, and he still balled out, made some absolutely crazy catches. That's really why the film community and the tape grinders love DeVonta Smith, just because his tape is so absolutely amazing. And I cannot disagree. I watched Alabama games last year during college football season. I watched, the national championship and the game prior. DeVonta Smith is that dude. DeVonta Smith is crazy good. And so that crazy season led him to being the 2020 Biletnikoff Award winner, just like Jamar Chase was in 2019. And on top of that, the 2020 Heisman Award winner, which DeVonta Smith is the first wide receiver since Michigan's Desmond Howard won it back in 1991 to win the Heisman Award. So there's really not much more you can say about DeVonta Smith's 2020 senior season, other than the fact that he just decided to stay for his final year, and now he's going to enter the NFL at a slightly older age. But I don't really think that diminishes his profile all that much, especially when you see and you saw what he could do just by himself. Absolutely insane. So now it's time to dive into these analytics, and this is going to be really the crux of the video here and the main talking point and debates regarding DeVonta Smith and his prospect profile. So like I said, his tape looks amazing. Dude's a stud. First rounder, automatically, are probably the first wide receiver off the board. Maybe Jamar Chase gets it, but it's between him and DeVonta Smith. So that's where we're at on tape. Analytically, he's got some blemishes. All right. So there's things that analytically you want to see from your prospects, you want to see from your wide receivers. And I've talked about them in the previous 2 videos with Jamar Chase and Rashad Bateman. These primarily are draft capital, first or second round draft capital. Third's okay, but you really want to see that first or second round draft capital for a wide receivers. DeVonta Smith is going to have that. And then finally, it is the age-adjusted production. You want to see an early age-adjusted production for these wide receivers, specifically at a 30% Dominator threshold for a young breakout age. That's what we saw from Jamar Chase. That's what we saw from Rashad Bateman. That is not entirely what we saw from DeVonta Smith. So Smith did have a 20-year-old breakout age at the 20% Dominator threshold. That was the 2019 season, his junior year, where he shared the room with Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Jalen Waddle. That was a 20-year-old breakout age at the 20% threshold. Did not hit 30%. The 30% threshold he more than hit in 2020 as a 21-year-old. So he has a 21-year-old 30% breakout age to his profile. And based off of his 30% breakout age and projected first-round draft capital, according to my hit rates, he actually has a 27% chance of hitting, which does not sound great, especially considering the fact that that is half or even possibly a third lower than Rashad Bateman and Jamar Chase. And it's not great. But I dove a little bit more into that number because when you look at all of the other first-round players, especially just first-round draft capital in and of itself, is basically a 50-50 shot at a chance of success. So why was that first round draft capital with the 21-year-old breakout age so much lower at 27%? I dove into it a little more. there's only 11 players that actually fit that category. So it's a very small sample size, but it does include players like Brandon Ayuk, Roddy White, and Reggie Wayne. So those 3 players are in there, and we don't really know enough about Brandon Ayuk to really say if he's going to be a hit, or at least more like Roddy White and Reggie Wayne were. But those guys are in that group, and that could certainly be more of the side that DeVonta Smith leans toward rather than all the other guys like a Nelson Aguilar or a Robert Meacham type player. Those guys fit that category, but they did not hit at the NFL level for fantasy football. So, you can kind of make your adjustments there for that hit rate. On top of breakout age and draft capital, DeVonta Smith also owns a career 47.3% Dominator rating, which is absolutely insane. That's actually the highest in the 2021 wide receiver class. And when you compare his profile to other previous Bama wide receivers, you can actually see that his profile is very similar to Calvin Ridley, who was a bit of an older prospect, just like DeVonta Smith is now, did receive that first round draft capital, had amazing first 2 seasons given, rookie adjusted and sophomore adjusted seasons in the NFL. Then finally this past year had that 3rd year wide receiver breakout. So that could be kind of the same path that DeVonta Smith winds up going down the same route. You can see on this table that he is not as good of a prospect as Amari Cooper or even Julio Jones, but he's certainly not a Henry Ruggs. He's not an Ardarius Stewart. He's not a Kevin Norwood. He's not in that range. He is much more with Ridley and Julio than he is down with those other guys. Finally, analytically, a lot of people want to make a lot over his undersized body structure. I get he's undersized. He's 6'1", 175 pounds. That's pretty undersized, but it's not completely undersized in the fact that I think it's really going to inhibit him at the next level. It didn't do anything to him in college. He still produced like an absolute monster. He won the Heisman Trophy. He absolutely can ball out at that height and weight combination. 2, I don't view BMI. It's similar in a statistic to the 40-yard dash. I actually put out a tweet about this, that those 2 numbers individually are pretty meaningless as long as you hit a certain threshold. Now, that threshold is not going to be hit by DeVonta Smith unless he gains like 20 or 30 pounds. It really boils down to what the NFL thinks about these numbers for them, because if the NFL tells us that they don't really worry and they're not concerned about DeVonta Smith's speed or weight or height or whatnot, then they wouldn't draft him in the first round. I mean, obviously the NFL makes mistakes, but the NFL is telling us that they view DeVonta Smith as an elite wide receiver prospect, and he's going to get that first round draft capital. And that, to me, analytically, is really the most important aspect for DeVonta Smith's profile. Now, obviously, I said that the NFL makes mistakes. We all know that that's true. Look at first round wide receivers in 2015, and you can see that there were a handful of mistakes in that draft class and in many other classes as well. So I actually went down to really see how many other wide receivers are in this 6'1", 175 range, right? Because he was compared to Justin Jefferson because of this picture that has been going around Twitter where it's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and DeVonta Smith all working out together. And the 2 guys that you really notice are Smith on the left and then Justin Jefferson in the middle. They look like the same size. And Justin Jefferson last year measured out at 6'1", 200 pounds-ish in that range. And Jamar Chase just is the guy that looks like a beast on the right. But a lot of people are saying, well, Justin Jefferson can succeed. Why can't DeVonta Smith in a similar situation? And so I went down, and based off of that argument, I was looking at other wide receivers to try to get a floor and a ceiling for DeVonta Smith based on his profile, his height and weight, kind of everything that comes together for his profile, and compare him to other wide receivers in a similar prospect profile. So for a floor, one of the guys that I thought was really interesting was actually Paul Richardson, who is himself 6'1", 175, ran a 4.440, a 46% Dominator rating out of Colorado, had an age 21-year-old breakout age at 30% Dominator rating, and was a second-round pick to Seattle in the 2014 draft class. So that, to me, was really interesting that their numbers aligned so similarly, both from an analytics standpoint and from their height and weight and a projected 40-yard dash, I expect DeVonta Smith to be in that 4.4 range, especially if we're getting out of Exos that Rashad Bateman's running in the low 4 or the high 4.3s. Tylan Wallace is running in the high 4.3s. Like, DeVonta Smith will be up there as well if those are the numbers that other wide receivers are pulling out. So Paul Richardson stood out as a really interesting comp. Not that I think that he's going to go the Paul Richardson route, but that could ultimately be like his lowest possible outcome in the NFL. Then I also pulled to give you a stance of his highest possible outcome. I already mentioned him previously, but Roddy White is also a really interesting comp for DeVonta Smith. 6'1", 207 pounds, ran a 4.46 40, 50% Dominator rating out of Alabama Birmingham, age 21-year-old breakout age at a 30% Dominator rating, first round pick. And then when you look at his NFL production and NFL stats, he really didn't do all that much in his first 2 seasons. Actually only combined for 1,000 receiving yards in his year 1 and year 2 combined. And then ripped off 6 straight seasons of 80 plus receptions and 1,000 plus yards with Matt Ryan, even across from Julio Jones as well. And this kind of all circles back in a really satisfying loop back to Calvin Ridley, who is now sharing time with Julio Jones in a Julio Roddy White type of situation that we saw just 10 years ago. So I thought those two players were really interesting just in terms of an ultimate floor to an ultimate ceiling for DeVonta Smith. He could be somewhere in there. He could be shading more the Roddy White side, but ultimately his analytical profile is not the death of DeVonta Smith. I do think that Jamar Chase and Rashad Bateman are slightly safer prospects, but DeVonta Smith has the same ceiling that I think both of those guys also hold, and that is why he is my wide receiver 3 and certainly does not belong outside of anybody's top 3, let alone their top 5. So finally, we can look at NFL landing spots for DeVonta Smith where he could succeed in year 1 and moving on. I found 3 teams in this early 10 through 15 range where we saw guys like Henry Ruggs last year and Jerry Jeudy being taken in the 2020 NFL class. And so I think that's about the range where DeVonta Smith might end up going. I've seen other mocks where he is taken to the Miami Dolphins at 3 overall. That certainly could happen, but I don't know if he is a top 10 pick. I'm not sold on that. And if he is, then the teams that I would want to see him go if he were a top 10 pick are the same as Jamar Chase's. Those same three teams, the Bengals, the Eagles, and the Detroit Lions. So I'm not really going to repeat that one. I found 3 new teams in a range where I think DeVonta Smith actually could go and definitely needs some wide receiver help. At least 2 of these teams really need wide receiver help. So the first is the New York Giants. They pick at 11th overall. He will come in as the for sure wide receiver 1 on that offense. Darius Slayton is, a lot of people hype up Darius Slayton. He's not it. He's not the guy. Sterling Shepard is getting older. He's more of a slot wide receiver. He's often injured, and he's not really the guy. Evan Ingram is a free agent. So when you pair DeVonta Smith with, unfortunately, Daniel Jones, or if it were another quarterback, Daniel Jones is certainly not the guy. But another quarterback maybe come in, and it's DeVonta Smith, it's Saquon Barkley, it's insert quarterback here. Sterling Shepard as a solid wide receiver 2. Even Slayton could be off on the other side. That is a pretty solid offense for the New York Giants, and I think DeVonta Smith could do very well there just in terms of pure volume and production. The next team I picked was the LA Chargers. This is actually pairing him with a very good quarterback. Actually the only team on this list that has a good quarterback as of this moment. And so DeVonta Smith with the LA Chargers, he could come in and he could learn behind Keenan Allen. He could refine his game a little bit more and not have the pressure of being the immediate wide receiver 1. This is kind of similar to that Justin Jefferson situation last year where Adam Thielen was the veteran, solid wide receiver. Then you put the rookie, the raw talent on the outside across from him, and you get fantasy goodness, and that could be DeVonta Smith in that LA Chargers offense. Mike Williams isn't it. He's signed on his 5th-year deal for the 2021 season, but is a free agent after that year. So you could insert DeVonta Smith into that same Mike Williams role, who had 1,000 receiving yards just 2 years ago. And so that offense could be very prolific, and DeVonta Smith could be a very good part of that offense. And so finally, the last team that I picked is the New England Patriots. They pick at 15 overall. Similar to the Giants situation, the quarterback situation is not there. It's not Cam Newton. Cam Newton's not it. He threw like 5 passing touchdowns all last year. Not a good situation, but like I said with the Giants, he would come in and immediately be the alpha wide receiver 1. It's not N'Keal Harry. It's not Jacoby Myers. It's not Julian Edelman. It would be DeVonta Smith to come in, and just based off of pure, sheer volume opportunity, DeVonta Smith could produce in year 1 and moving on down the line. And if you think that sucks for DeVonta Smith, and that might actually lower him on your board if he's your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, but lands with the Giants or the Patriots and the opportunities there, but the quarterback situation is really fluky and in flux, it might lower him on your board just based off of landing spot, kind of like what we did with A.J. Brown a couple years ago, based off of quarterback situation. But I promise you, DeVonta Smith could find a way into fantasy stardom and fantasy goodness, because situations change uber quickly. And actually, to go back to Roddy White was in a very bad situation his first 2 years. He had Michael Vick as his quarterback, but those of you that remember, or maybe you don't know, Michael Vick never threw for over 2,500 passing yards in a single season with Roddy White. And then his third season, he did have over 1,000 receiving yards, but again, his quarterback only threw for 22 or 2,300 passing yards in Roddy White's third season. It wasn't until his fourth season that he got Matt Ryan and got his quarterback that he really wanted, and then continued to rip off 1,000-yard seasons early on at a amazing clip, even with Julio Jones, like I said. So there may be some patience that needs to happen if DeVonta Smith ends up going to the Giants or the Patriots for his quarterback. But we have previous examples of success and how quickly landing spots can change in the NFL, especially in today's NFL, when quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson are expressing their dissatisfaction with their teams. Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford are moving. Like, there's so much quarterback movement in today's NFL that those landing spots to the Patriots and Giants could change in a heartbeat, even mid-season for DeVonta Smith. So just based off of opportunity, I like all 3 of those teams to pair with DeVonta Smith for his landing spot. So that's going to do it for today's episode on DeVonta Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe to the DLF YouTube channel. We're trying to drop content every single day. If you enjoy this rookie series, I'm going to continue to do a little bit more, maybe just one overarching one on the second round, and then I'm going to look into some Superflex content. Please drop a comment down below if you want to see maybe something more specific, a player analysis, or different types of content that you would like to see from the DLF YouTube channel. That would be awesome feedback to receive from you guys, and we'd love to give you the content that you really want to see. So with that all being said, guys, thank you so much for watching and tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time.